Hello and welcome to Breast Friends Cancer Support Network. I'm Michelle Beck. I'm a 9-year, two-time survivor of breast cancer. I work at Breast Friends of Oregon, and when I have time, I write at a blog called I Never Liked Pink. Today, I'm so excited for you to listen and hear all this amazing information. And my guest today is just a doll. Her name is Claire Paxman. She is the brand ambassador and Director of Global Training for Paxman Scalp Cooling. And today we're going to talk about the what, the why, and the how of preventing hair loss through chemotherapy, which can be such a challenging time for so many. And I'm so fortunate that I was introduced to Claire last year by a friend of mine, another guest who was on the show. And we'll I'm sure mention her a bit later. Her name's Erica Datar, and she has an organization which helps locals here in Portland, Oregon, cover the costs. Because she went through this as well and knows how challenging it can be. But Claire is, anyway, when I met her, we've talked multiple times, and I love her energy and her spirit. And we'll get into this about how this company was formed and why, and it's so personal to her. So I just want to get started and welcome Claire. And can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, what an introduction. Thank you so much. So hi, as you said, my name's Claire Paxman. I am one of the family members of the founders of Paxman Scalp Cooling and incredibly passionate about helping people and making people aware that there is such a treatment exists. And I'm, as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm from that old England. I'm across the water, but obviously we are established in the US. And yeah, that's as much about me, unless you want a little bit more personal details.
Well, I know them already, and I just knowing you for what little I do, I just can't wait to come visit and meet you. So, but let's talk about, what does Paxman Scalp Cooling? Oh, actually, first, how did breast cancer come into your life?
So that was down to my beautiful late mum, which is kind of where and why we do what we do as well. So my mum was diagnosed with breast cancer age 36. And that's when initially breast cancer first came into our lives and into my life, and subsequently later on when she was re-diagnosed and had secondaries. So it's been a huge part of my life, of our life, and continues to be so in now helping people who have breast cancer.
And I love that, because unfortunately we have lost your mother, and it was obviously a very emotional journey for you, but
Yeah.
that is how Paxman Scalp Cooling came to be. So can you tell us about what your company does?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are a medical device, and ultimately we help people to retain their hair during their chemotherapy. So we're reducing and limiting chemotherapy-induced alopecia. We're also know and can clinically prove that your hair scalp cooling helps promote regrowth as well. So it's, looking at scalp cooling beyond hair retention. So we're helping people to retain, but also helping them to helping for the hair to grow back thicker and faster as well. So that's what Paxman is, and that's what we do.
It's amazing because this technology did not exist. And your company there are other companies out there, but your company is the preeminent company in the world, really, that's doing this and helping people to not lose their hair. It's such an important part of our identities, especially as women. We're so connected to our hair. That was one of the things I was so scared about. Honestly, when I've been diagnosed twice, and both times I'm like, do I have to have chemo? And it wasn't even so much the chemo that scared the crap out of me, is, well, I lose my hair, because I'm like, I have a lot of hair, and it's, it's one of the things people compliment me on most is my hair, even though it makes me crazy. But it literally, I was terrified. And the fact that you and your family have developed this company and continued it on is really amazing. So, and the history of it is fabulous. So tell me how it actually came to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So so scalp cooling itself, or cold cap treatment, has been around for a very long time, sort of even back in the 70s. People had tourniquets put on their heads, or like frozen peas, because the thought and what people wanted to do was reduce the blood flow to those hair follicles. But so when my beautiful late mum Sue was diagnosed, just like yourself and as you've just described, this prospect of losing her hair absolutely terrified her. Now, in the UK, we have been using scalp cooling for many, many years in different forms, and it just so happened that they had a device at the hospital my mum was being treated at. So she did try it, but unfortunately, it was an older primitive type, and subsequently, it didn't work for her. So when my mum was, firsthand really distressed, it's actually the first time that she cried. And I stood in the bathroom aged 14 and literally cut it all off for her, which was horrendous, absolutely horrendous thing to do. But my dad, Glenn Paxman, who's our founder and chairman, already a successful businessman, saw how completely and utterly distressed that she was, and saw really the faults or the why the current method wasn't working as effectively. And that's because, as a family, we have over 70, 80 years of refrigeration experience in the drinks dispense industry. So to the
AKA
point where
beer.
Yeah, absolutely. So to the point that my wonderful grandfather, Eric Paxman, actually developed and invented a beer cooler, an ice bank beer cooler. So having that knowledge and understanding of cooling liquids and maintaining that temperature, that's what all the old methods were not successful in doing. And also there were other tasks such as being very, very labor intensive for nursing staff, very, very uncomfortable for the people actually wearing them and going through the treatment. And yeah, so that was the point. It was kind of, if it was a cartoon character, it would literally have had a light bulb would have shone on the top of his head saying, ha ha, I can make something that works. I'm going to make something that worked. And, with the help of his brother, my uncle, Neil Paxman, who is, literally a guru when it comes to refrigeration, they set about developing the Paxman system. Some very different to what we have now, but the principles were there. It was effective in cooling the scalp. So that's when the majority of the big work started for us. The major work started because we didn't have any clinical data to support it, and very limited, in fact, no knowledge or understanding of chemotherapy. And also very limited in medical device supply and working with hospitals. But it's very different now. It's a very different story now.
So that was obviously a huge undertaking, and unfortunately it wasn't able to benefit your mother. But I'm sure with your father as the founder and you said chairman, your brother Richard, is that right, is the CEO?
Correct. Yeah.
And
yeah.
How does that keep your spirit of your mom with you?
Oh gosh, wow, yeah. So my mum did actually, before her cancer, when her cancer reoccurred, we did actually have the device. She did get to use it, but unfortunately it didn't work for her. And that was just because it was very early days. The chemotherapy that she was having was palliative. It was very, it was a strong regime, and she did lose her hair. But in the interest of research, she did actually continue to use, she did use it and continue to use it, and her hair did actually start to grow back. So, which was, great to see. But yeah, she sadly died on October the 31st in the year 2000. So it's 22 years ago. She was only 44 years old, which is absolutely no age. But as you say, her legacy lives on. Everything that we do, that my wonderful brother Rich, who, as I say, is our CEO, is at the helm, is incredible. And, I'm so lucky that I get to work with him every single day in our mum's memory. and we keep her memory alive. You know, everyone that gets access to Paxman, everyone that gets to retain their hair or have the opportunity to retain their hair is my mum's legacy.
Oh, I
And
love that.
and whenever I'm talking about, you know, like this now, or whenever I'm talking on other subjects or other platforms, I will, you know, always speak about her. It's integral in our training. We actually talk about the company history in our training, and yeah, it's brilliant that we get to keep her memory and her name alive, and through everything that we do. So yeah, she's with us. She's with us every day. She's with us all the time. Pictures of her, the video that's on our website, you know, so people know what she's like. Everybody says I look just like her. I'm a brunette version of her. My mum had naturally curly hair. It was blonde. She had blue eyes. I've got the dark eyes but the naturally curly hair. And everyone says that I am just like her. So it's, yeah,
Yes,
it's
from
wonderful.
the photographs that I've seen, you two are twins, other than the hair color, and just stunning. And I'm sure it must have just been really awful for her to have to go through that, in addition to the devastating cancer, but the hair loss. And what made your father and your uncle really decide that, like, okay, we're going to turn this into a company to help other people? Because, as you said, there was not a lot of research. There were you had no experience in medical devices. And what was the impetus to say, hey, we're going to do this?
It was absolutely, ultimately, my mum, and seeing how utterly distressed she was. I mean, she was an incredible woman anyway, and was so unbelievably strong. But to see the impact that it had on her as an individual, as a woman, as a mother, was huge. And so that was absolutely the drive, with you know, to say that we just had the refrigeration experience but no other experience. And you know, that was completely and utterly was the drive. And knowing that my mum was not a singular person who felt like this, that this is echoed all over the world, everywhere. And so it was that need and desire to want to help, to want to make a difference, and want to make sure that people don't have to go through the trauma of hair loss.
Well, as like you had mentioned earlier, you actually helped your mother shave her head and cut all of her hair off when she was going through this. So it has
Yeah,
left a lasting impression on you as well. And I neither of us have actually gone through chemo, but we've seen the effects of what it can do to women. And I'm
yeah,
sure, with your time at Paxman, but you've also seen how your product, your device, can change that for so many women.
yeah, absolutely.
So it is amazing. Let's also, I want to talk about how the process actually works. So
Yeah.
I know there are a few different names out there for it. Some people say cold capping, but yours, you refer to it as scalp cooling. And I think I know the difference, but can you kind of explain what's going on there with how your system works?
Yeah, of course. So we're kind of adopting the cold capping as well now, because it's become more of a universal description, and for the actual treatment itself, whether it's whether you're using an individual iced cap, or whether you're using a refrigerated system with a cap attached to it, which is what Paxman is. So yeah, we have a small compact refrigerated unit, which sits in the infusion center next to your infusion chair. And then we have a soft silicone cap, which comes in a different number of different sizes. And that then is what is worn during the chemotherapy. So it's worn for a period of time before, during your infusion, and then for a period of time afterwards, depending on what drug that you're on. And that pumps this special liquid coolant into this cap, and subsequently cools the scalp. So effectively, what we are trying to do, and how scalp cooling works, is because chemotherapy or a cancerous tumor is a rapidly dividing cell. So the chemotherapy targets all rapidly dividing cells in the body. It cannot differentiate between that nasty cancerous cell and a healthy cell. So your hair is your second fastest dividing cell in the body. So 90% of the time it's in its active growth phase, which is also known as its anagen phase. So what we're trying to do in the few mechanisms of how proven mechanisms of how scalp cooling works is, first of all, vasoconstriction. So we're trying to limit the blood flow, or we are limiting the blood flow to the scalp, which is carrying that chemotherapy drug, and it lessens it down to 20 to 40%. So that means that less chemotherapeutic drug is actually getting to that hair follicle. Then what we know is that, and that also has an effect on the actual diffusion of the drug across that plasma membrane to the hair follicle. What we also know is that by cooling those cells to a certain temperature of around, I nearly did my Celsius then, but yeah, so to around 68 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit, then the actual cells lay dormant, stop rapidly dividing. So that's the two sort of main mechanisms of how scalp cooling works. So ultimately, protecting the hair follicles from the adjuvant effects of the chemotherapy.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I want to talk about the older fashioned method, I guess, when we get back, because I want to explain the difference. So, but we do need to take a quick break. Listeners, please stay with us. If you would like to help Breast Friends continue on its mission to ensure that women don't go through cancer alone, you can donate on our website, breastfriends.org, or you can text BF Radio to 41444. Or if you or a loved one need our help, please go on our website to patient programs and see what we can do for you. Please stay with us. We'll be back in a minute. For staying with us, I'm Michelle Beck, and my guest is Claire Paxman, Paxman Scalp Cooling, and we are talking about the what, the how, the why of preventing hair loss due to chemotherapy. And before break, we just talked about the Paxman method, where you have the coolant machine, which actually looks like a room air conditioner that you can just kind of roll around. I was looking at pictures yesterday. I'm like, that looks like what's in my bedroom, but for a completely different reason, for hot flashes instead of keeping my hair. And so that's connected to the silicone cap during the chemotherapy process. But can you kind of explain what I guess was formerly or still known as the other process, which I think most people know is cold capping?
Yeah. So the difference is so you have, so there's a couple of different methods, but they're known as either gel caps or ice caps, and some of them are kept in chest freezers, and they are individual caps. Or another method in which is used in the US, where they don't have Paxman systems, is where it's dry ice. So the caps are sort of flattened and they come in a dry ice box, and then they need to be sort of manipulated into a shape, and then they're placed on the head. But the ultimate difference and aim of those is to do the same, to cool the scalp and protect those hair follicles. But the difference with those is because they're not connected to any form of refrigeration, they have to be changed. They have to be changed over every some are 20 minutes, some are 30 minutes. But yeah, and so
incredibly labor intensive for the chemotherapy, the infusion nurses, because they're busy doing other things. And yes, they can help with this, but I mean, both systems require training. But I mean, your system just seems like a no-brainer. Like, this is the way to go.
Well, yeah. So the actual hospitals, facilities don't have the other versions, the cold caps. They don't adopt those, or they don't have anything to do with them. What happens with those is that patients will actually bring them themselves into the infusion clinic, and they will operate. So they usually have what's classed as a capper. Now that might be somebody special, or it might be a family member, or somebody to help get these caps ready and actually swap and change them out. The difference with the Paxman system is that it is set up within the hospitals, within the facilities. They do have the machines. The infusion nurses are trained on how to actually operate the machines and connecting the caps. The caps themselves, once you have paid for your treatment, our pharmacy dispatch the caps to the patient's home. And this is obviously in the US.
Mhm.
So then it's there. We kind of put the onus and on the individual, the patient, for them to actually fit their own cap. So we get them to practice a minimum of 3 times. So when they go to the infusion center, they will actually prepare their own hair and fit their own cap, and then the infusion nurses will then attach them to the system. Depending on which infusion center it is, some of the nurses are very much hands-on as well, and will help. But we just feel it's also a thing that it's something that's in their control, and there's nobody better that knows how well a cap fits than you as an individual. But we have lots of supporting information, such as tutorial videos. My Instagram is a source of help as well. So I've got a bit of a slower video and showed best tips on how to get a really good cap fit as well, because it's in our vested interest. We want this to work for people. We want this people to feel supported. So, whether you are providing the treatment or whether you're an individual that's going through the treatment, that Paxman will support you, whichever journey you're on, and to help you and to make sure you get the best out of your treatment.
Yeah, there really are videos all over the place and instructional. And what is your Instagram and the Paxman Instagram?
So Paxman Instagram is at Scalp Cooling, and my own Instagram is at claire.paxman.
Perfect. And there is also, there's videos on YouTube, and on the website, there's a lot of instructional information and that the listeners can go out and find, because it's super helpful. And I mean, I figured out how I would do it if I ever needed to, but are there any adverse reactions to this?
So the typical reactions or any adverse reactions that people can experience through this is headaches, feeling cold. Some people may find there's a little bit of dizziness or sleepiness, but a lot of what they are can be the transient. They're not throughout the whole of the treatment, and they can be combated in one way or another. So what we really strongly advocate is for people to use some form of protection on their forehead. So in their cap kits, they do receive a fabric headband. If the fabric headband doesn't quite work for them, then using cotton rounds, or even sort of medical gauze or something, as long as they have something underneath the cap, because it comes a little bit lower down the hairline, and it's where it can be touching the skin. That's where people find it can be uncomfortable, and unnecessarily uncomfortable. So as long as they have something protecting the forehead, that can help alleviate that uncomfortable feeling. Headaches, you can have some pain relief to help with that, and just simple things like drinking warm drinks, dressing warmly. All of these things help. And people do sort of tend to find that, or they absolutely do find that the first 10 to 15 minutes is when people struggle. And that's just because your scalp is being taken down in temperature in quite a fast succession, and from your average scalp temperature down to that 64 to 72, sorry. And yeah, it's so that's why it can feel uncomfortable. It's you can liken it to sort of, if you go in the sea and it's really cold.
But then you get used to it. Your body adjusts.
So this is where we are a little bit different in how we say things. So I say acclimatize over the pond, but you guys say acclimate. So
yes.
But yeah, and you absolutely do, and people do generally find that after sort of 15, 20 minutes, they have got used to it.
Perfect. Has there been any, I'm sure there's been studies. What about the possibility, since you're freezing these cells on your scalp to prevent the chemo from killing your hair follicles? I'm saying this in very layman's terms. I apologize. But is it possible for scalp metastasis? Since the cancer, you're trying to kill the cancer, but you're freezing those cells. Could what I'm asking.
Of course. But I am going to slightly correct you there,
Please.
Michelle, because remember, we're not freezing those hair follicles. That's that's a common
Cooling. You're
misconception.
cooling
We're
them.
cooling them.
Got
Yeah,
it.
we're cooling them, but we're not completely restricting that blood flow. So if you remember, I said about the vasoconstriction, we're limiting the blood flow.
Got
So
it.
chemotherapy is still getting to those hair follicles and is still getting to the scalp. That's why people do still lose hair when they go through this treatment. So, but there have been a number of studies, and one of the most recent ones was a meta-analysis, systematic review and meta-analysis of looking at a large number of patients there was over 1,000 in each group of who'd not had scalp cooling versus who had had scalp cooling, and the occurrence of scalp metastases. I mean, it's the chances of getting scalp metastases anywhere is less than 1%. In this meta-analysis, it actually looked at the percentage of scalp metastases that had occurred in the non-cooled arm was 0.61, and then in the scalp cooled arm was 0.41. So it was, actually, sorry, that's the other way around. Sorry, I do apologize. But my point being is that it was a 0.2% difference. So that proved and showed that it's no statistical difference, and that having scalp cooling does not increase your chances of developing scalp metastases.
Perfect. Thank you for correcting me, because I have cancer brain, and there's some things
No
that
problem.
even if I hear them 2 minutes prior, it still goes in and out of my brain. And so since it is cooling, and what is the efficacy of your device?
Okay, so it is determined on and dependent on what chemotherapy drug regime that you are having. So the drug regimes in the categories of that cause the most hair loss is you've got your anthracyclines, which is such as epirubicin, doxorubicin, and then you've got your taxanes, which are such drugs as docetaxel or paclitaxel. They're all abbreviated into other kind of different words, but so we do see varying different results. With the taxanes, we see much greater success, so 70 to 80%, sometimes in some cases more. With the anthracyclines, it's much more around 30 to 40%. So it's less successful. So what we do say, and to manage expectations, is that you have a 50% chance of retaining 50% or more of your hair. Because as I mentioned, and I just alluded to before, hair loss does still occur with scalp cooling, but the cooling versus no cooling is the chance of retaining 50% or more of your hair. But as I also mentioned as well, and what we're really trying to sort of get the message out there is because some people might think, well, I'm not going to bother because I'm having an anthracycline because my percentages are much, much less. But it's the fact that we can now clinically prove that your hair will grow back thicker and faster within a shorter period of time. It's actually around 12 weeks. We've had people who have experienced they're on their second diagnosis and second line of treatment, and previously they didn't cool. This next time they had cooled, and some people have lost 80% of their hair, if not, or sometimes more. We've even had a couple of ladies who shaved, but then that's when they've had the EC. But then when they've gone on to the Taxol, they've started to see hair regrowth, and then the hair regrowth occurs after as well, much quicker, to the point where they've said they're sort of 4 to 5 months ahead of before. So it's what I was mentioning before about looking at the benefits of scalp cooling beyond hair retention whilst you're going through chemo. It's the benefits after as well. So,
that's a huge incentive to.
Absolutely.
It's definitely something that I see is so many women, they struggle for how long it takes for their hair to come back.
Yeah.
But if trying this, even if you have the odds of retaining 50% chance of retaining 50% of your hair, I'd go for that.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate. I have
you wouldn't retain any if you don't. The other thing as well, really like to use this opportunity to mention as well is that there is, if you having the drug docetaxel and you're having a high dose, so cumulative over your treatments of 400 micrograms per meter squared, it has been associated with a 10% risk of persistent chemotherapy induced alopecia. So, and that's where your hair never grows back properly. But we've seen that the toxicity is lessened when you scalp cool with that drug. So in effect, it should always be provided scalp cooling if you're having that dose and that drug.
That's amazing. Can say if someone is going through, they have two diagnoses years apart, can you do scalp cooling more than once?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can do it more than once. There's no contraindications with not being able to scalp cool on second line treatment.
I love that, because unfortunately the percentages of reoccurrence are average 30%, but with so many different kinds of cancer, they're higher. And so that is something that's really positive. So you can continue to help the women as they go forward. What kind of reactions? I know you're brand ambassador and you do training, so a lot of internal stuff, but I'm sure you've talked to so many women who've gone through this. How are their reactions about being able to use the scalp cooling?
Yeah, well, I help people on an individual basis, on a weekly basis, and have done many occasions over the years. In fact, some people have become friends, and the reactions are just, well, they make me cry, to be honest. And we're all incredibly grateful for what people do say. And this, to the point where it allowed me to live with my diagnosis. It allowed me to go to work and not have to tell people. Some people even go as far as not wanting to tell the children, which is absolutely their prerogative. And so it allowed them to do that. But it just allowed them normality. It allowed them to not look at themselves in a mirror and see a cancer patient. And it's very, very heartwarming, all of the wonderful stories and thanks that we get.
I love that. We do have more to talk about, but we're going to take another quick break. Listeners, if you would like to be a guest on the show, or if you would like to send me your warrior story of inspiration and how cancer may have changed your life for the better, please email me at michellebeck@breastfriends.org. And we'll be back in a minute. Stay with us. Back, and thanks for staying with us. I'm Michelle Beck, and my guest is Claire Paxman, and we are talking about the what, how, why, and all of the benefits of scalp cooling, which Paxman does. So Claire, we've talked about so many things so far, but I wanted to talk about something which is probably on many people's mind. Does insurance cover something like this? I know we're in different parts of the world, but I know you have some experience with the US and how we work. So how does that generally work?
So at the moment, it's not nationally covered by insurance.
Bastards.
However, this is the landscape of this is changing. There have been a number of successful applicants of patients who have submitted for refunds during their treatment, or after their treatment, should I say. And some of the insurance companies have either part paid, part subsidized, but the main thing is that we have now been issued CPT codes.
That's great. That makes it so much easier to submit, because you have to have those codes.
Absolutely. So that was incredible for us towards the back end of last year, or the middle of last year. And so things are changing, and it is looking as well that it will start off with Medicaid, who will be actually covering scalp cooling as from later on this year, which is wonderful, and it's going to obviously change the landscape and make it more accessible. And then we hope that then the private insurance companies then will follow suit as well. So we kind of changing our how we do our enrollments to adapt to this. But all of this is coming soon. So it's really, really promising, which means much greater access for people to have the treatment.
And that would be amazing. And I hope there are women legislators out there who are going to be pushing this. And not that it doesn't affect men, but I feel like hair is very different for many men versus women. But insurance companies, they cover the costs of things like reconstruction to get women back to where they're feeling in a somewhat normal state, which is tens of thousands of dollars. And that is not how much this costs. It's a pittance compared to what that is. And it really would help women so much overall. As you said, the stories you've heard from your patients, that it's just allows them this whole different cancer experience, which is really positive.
Yeah, well, the great thing is, and the great thing that has helped us with this, is that it is now nationally recognised on the NCCN guidelines for both breast cancer and for ovarian cancer as well. So, that massively helps in terms of people recognising the importance of it, and that it is a part of the standards of cancer care, and that's what ultimately we are absolutely aiming for. But there are some incredible foundations that have set up to help with subsidizing or help funding scalp cooling for people as well, which there's one incredible one in your area, which I know you, as you alluded to earlier, you had the fabulous Erica Datar from 19B Strong, Erica successfully used the Paxman system when she was going through her treatment, her breast cancer treatment, and afterwards she was lucky to be able to afford it, but afterwards her and her husband, who are just a phenomenal team, wonderful, as you well know, because she's a friend now. And I haven't met them yet, but I can't wait to. But yeah, they've now set up the fabulous foundation 19B Strong, and to help to fund people who can't afford it within your area. So which is fantastic, and it just again makes it more accessible for people, which is just wonderful. And we're so grateful for people like Erica and Josh. And there is a national foundation as well called Hair to Stay. And again, if people aren't in your Oregon area, then please do go onto our website, which is coldcap.com, and there is a list of other foundations and subsidiary foundations that have set up that may be available in your area as well.
Perfect. So sorry, my brain has all these questions running in it. From my knowledge, you have to start your first treatment. So you need to be ready to go. And it can be challenging for some, because some women go in, they meet their oncologist, they have all their tests, and they're like, okay, you're starting chemo next week. That can be challenging, I imagine, to make sure that your infusion room has the systems and things like that. What if, say a patient is going to go have surgery first and then chemo later, and they are interested in scalp cooling, but it's not offered? What do they do?
So we obviously there is time, and absolutely, as you've just mentioned there is time constraints, but we will ultimately do anything to try and help and work with their oncologist and the facility to see if it's a possibility to introduce Paxman. So if anybody is in that position, then please do speak to your oncologist, to your physician. Reach out to us at our email addresses, provide an introduction, and we are always readily available to speak to them and talk to them about the process and how Paxman can be set up in your facility.
And as obviously listeners know, you are based in the UK, but you do have operations here in the US with, people on the ground, boots on the ground, let's say, who really are working on the US side of it, the training, the proliferation, and really getting the information out there. So it's not just where you're at in the UK. You're really focusing on getting this as much around the world as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously our HQ and senior leadership team are dotted around. To be fair, we manufacture in the UK, but we are set up as Paxman US. So we have our head office as well or our office in Houston, and then we have the fabulous Karen Buck, who is our VP of US operations. And then, we have all of our site and training managers there who are there to help with looking after all of the hospitals, facilities, provide the training, provide support. We also actually have patient liaisons as well. So such as the fabulous Shauna and Leah, who have both been through breast cancer survivors and have also both used Paxman. So they are our patient liaison and are available if you need help with your cap fitting or you need support or hand holding for your treatment. We have a full infrastructure set up across the pond over there to help and to be there as support for whether you're a facility or a patient.
I love that, having the patient liaisons as women who understand, and not that
Yeah.
you don't understand, but actually having sat in that chair with their scalp cooling on their cap on their head, and they understand, they've actually been through the process. And I imagine can just give a great perspective for patients that are, have questions. And so that's really amazing. What is coming up next for Paxman on the horizon, and maybe improving the efficacy of the systems?
Yeah, so and just on from what you were saying, Michelle, there is
Mhm.
nothing more valuable than peer-to-peer support.
Yes.
Absolutely not. And it's something that we are very proud of and advocate a lot. So what's on the horizon? Gosh, lots and lots. So a few years ago, we actually invested into our local university, who we've worked with for a number of years, but we officially opened the world's first Scalp Cooling Research and Innovation Centre. And we've been very
Nice. I love
busy.
that.
Yeah. And it's a dedicated centre looking at scalp cooling research and innovation. And, our goal to improve the effectiveness is absolutely priority. We want it to be, minimum 80% success across the board, not this 50%. And even our goal of chasing zero hair loss. So there's lots of different things that we're doing to help achieve that. So we've always used genetically modified cells with our cell temperature testing, but now we actually cultivate real life hair follicles, so we can exactly see exactly what happens to that hair follicle when you're delivering chemotherapy to it. Also the proteins that are given off, etc., which then help us to better understand how we can further protect, and particularly with those anthracyclines. We've also been doing studies and developed a topical agent, which is used in conjunction with the cooling, enhances and further protects that hair follicle, because we know it doesn't work for everybody, and some people are natural hotheads, if you like. So by having this topical agent, which used in conjunction with the scalp cooling, can further protect those hair follicles, again, from the chemotherapy. And we're also really investing our time into further developing our caps, which will be much more bespoke and much more detailed in terms of different head shapes and sizes. So all of these different things that we're doing will help to attribute towards our goal of zero hair loss, or certainly improving the effectiveness. We are also working with the University of Singapore and have started preliminary testing and trials on a cooling and compression device for peripheral neuropathy.
Oh my
So
gosh, that would be amazing, because that is such a problem for so many who go through any type of chemotherapy.
yeah, absolutely. It's such a debilitating, lifelong side effect.
Hmm.
It doesn't go away. It just, like,
Oh,
the hair will grow back. This is this is something that lasts forever. So so we've developed, so it's another extension to Paxman, and we've developed a system in conjunction with the University of Singapore. So watch this space with that one as well, folks.
I'm sorry. I still can't. I'm dying to like see the hair follicles. Like I can't get my head away from the picture of growing hair follicles in the lab to do the testing.
I'll send you a picture.
Please.
I'll send you a picture of a This is what we do, and we dissect them so that we can get more out of them. So yeah, I'll send you some slides on what a dissected real life hair follicle looks like.
I'm so glad there are people out there who do this because it is so far out of my wheelhouse. I'm like, everyone has their specialty, and mine is obviously talking. But it is definitely not growing hair follicles.
No, we leave that up to our Paxman scientists,
yes.
to the fabulous people that we work with at the University of Huddersfield. But yeah, I mean, I will confess, I was really sort of, science wasn't a strong point for me when I was at school.
Oh, gosh, no.
But now I'm, when we get a chance to go to the labs, or we get a chance to, when we get actually the data and the clinical findings read back to us, I'm always a bit like, oh, I wish I'd concentrated more, but still at the same time, it's incredibly fascinating. And again, this is groundbreaking, world's first research and science that we're doing, and this is us that's doing this. And again, all in my mum's memory, and just has come from such a tragedy. It's wonderful. It's great.
It's finding
science
that
rocks.
I'm going to put that on those show notes. #Science rocks. One thing I know that Paxman does is you partner with a lot of small organizations and nonprofits out there who are helping, including Breast Friends. Paxman is sponsoring this show for the month of March, and I'm so thankful for that. And we're doing some different partnerships at the same time that this show is actually airing. I'm going to be on a Facebook Live with Claire, so talking about Breast Friends and things like that. So we'll post that too. And I love technology that these are actually going to go live at the same time.
Yeah, brilliant.
So thank you for that. But gosh, we are almost out of time. So I want to make sure again that our listeners know all the different ways to find you and Paxman on Instagram, Claire.Paxman, and then also at Scalp Cooling. So those are two separate ones. Facebook, it's Paxman Scalp Cooling. And you also have the website coldcap.com. And that the coldcap.com, that's the consumer facing website with all the instructional and the informational. If you go to paxmanscalpcooling.com, you'll get there. But
absolutely. But the most, the better one for people who are interested is and the patient facing one is coldcap.com.
Perfect. We do have a few more seconds. Why is it so important for Paxman to give back in this way to help small companies?
So we want it. There's so much synergies between us, Paxman, and people like yourselves. We all want to help people through their cancer diagnosis, and it absolutely makes sense for us to partner together. And we want to help, and we want to help to give you that platform as well, and to help you to function and be able to do what the incredible work that you do. So
well, again, thank you, Claire, and thank you to all of Paxman and your family for starting this amazing organization, and all of you for keeping it up, because it's so innovating and helps so many people. So thank you. Listeners, if you or a loved one need our services, please visit breastfriends.org. You can donate on our website or by texting BF Radio to 41444 to ensure that women do not go through cancer alone. You can find our podcast anywhere you find your favorite podcast or on Voice America. And we'll be back next week. Until then, remember, we rise by lifting each other.